What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have the long-awaited showdown between Katie Taylor, 20 wins and 0 losses, who is defending all of the lightweight belts. She's the undisputed champion, so she's defending the WBA, WBC, IBF, and WBO lightweight titles against Amanda Serrano. 42 wins, 1 loss, and 1 draw. This has been awaited for a while, for a couple years. Like around the time, Katie Taylor was fighting, Delphine Persoon for the first time. This is like mid-2019. So that's when like the buildup and the anticipation started around an eventual showdown between Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano. And they are pretty close in age. Katie Taylor is actually 35. Amanda Serrano is 33. But Amanda Serrano's been a professional since 2009, whereas Katie Taylor, who was an Olympic gold medalist in the London Games in 2012, didn't start her professional career until 2016. That's why Amanda Serrano has so many more fights under her belt than Katie Taylor. But Katie Taylor, has more or less campaigned in the same division for her entire career. She's now been the lightweight champion since like 2017, and then she started slowly gathering all the rest of the lightweight belts, and for the past 5-6 fights has basically been defending all of the lightweight belts. So she has been the undisputed champion at lightweight for a while now, whereas Amanda Serrano has one of the most unprecedented types of careers that you could ever imagine. And what I mean by that is she picked up her first belt at 130. That is one weight class below where this fight against Katie Taylor will be fought. So she won a belt at 130, and then she won a title at 135, and then one at 126, 2 divisions below, and then 122, even below that, and then 118 bantamweight, and then 122, so she went back to 122, and then 140. So she went from 122 to 140, like within the same year, or at least within the same calendar year. 122, then to 140, and then all the way from 140, which is one division above where this fight against Katie Taylor is going to take place, all the way down to 115, the smallest weight class she's ever competed in. So she went from her highest weight class at 140 and then won a belt at 115, and then back up to 126, where she stayed for a while, at least for the last few fights, and now she's going back from 126 featherweight to 135 to fight Katie Taylor. So think about that. She has won titles everywhere between 115 and then 118, and then 122, 126, 130, 135, and 140. That is winning major belts across 7 different divisions. That's like some Manny Pacquiao type stuff right there. So you have one champion in Katie Taylor who is, again, more or less campaigned in the same division, winning all the belts and then holding it down, defending those belts fight after fight. And then you've got Amanda Serrano, who's just been weight class jumping for the past several years, winning all but one fight. And the one that she lost was like 10 years ago against Frida Wahlberg, and that was via decision. And so as I'm sizing up this long-awaited bout between Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano, who stand at more or less around the same height, who have roughly the same reach. Amanda Serrano is a southpaw. That is one thing that I'm factoring big in this equation against Katie Taylor, because Katie Taylor has only fought one southpaw in her last several fights, and that was against Natasha Jonas about 3 fights ago. And that fight against Natasha Jonas was actually very close. Natasha Jonas has since won her first title just about a month ago. I think it was on the Amir Khan versus Kell Brook fight. I think it was on that undercard. But yeah, Natasha Jonas fought a super close fight with Katie Taylor. Now, Natasha Jonas has much more of a patient style than Amanda Serrano. Amanda Serrano, a fellow southpaw, throws a lot more volume than Natasha Jonas. But Natasha Jonas, in making Katie Taylor have to bring the fight to her and then was able to counter well, Natasha Jonas is a lot more of a counter puncher than Amanda Serrano. But yeah, that was a super close fight where I was watching Taylor versus Jonas going into the scorecard thinking, damn, did Natasha Jonas possibly pull this one off? But then I was thinking, they're going to probably shade the scorecards towards Katie Taylor, I mean, that's just a part of the game. And especially having seen Katie Taylor versus Delphine Persoon 1, which took place, again, in mid-2019, where I'm watching the fight, and this was on the Callum Smith versus Hassan Ndam undercard, and I was all but certain that Delphine Persoon pulled out a 7 rounds to 3 or 6 rounds to 4 type of scorecard against Katie Taylor. I thought at worst for Delphine Persoon, maybe they rule this like a split draw where Katie Taylor keeps her belts or something like that. But no, they actually gave Katie Taylor the majority decision win, where one judge had it a draw and then the other 2 judges had it in favor of Katie Taylor. That judging had me thinking, yeah, Natasha Jonas doesn't stand a chance with the judges, in this case against Katie Taylor. And again, Katie Taylor was awarded the decision win against Natasha Jonas. But that first fight between Delphine Persoon and Katie Taylor, Delphine Persoon really deserved the decision win there. I had it 7 rounds to 3 in favor of Delphine Persoon. And after the judges' scorecards were read, Delphine Persoon was wagging her finger no way. And then you see Delphine Persoon walking, down the aisle back to her locker room after the disappointing scorecard, and she was just bawling in tears. I felt so bad for her with that decision. But yeah, Katie Taylor had all types of trouble against a pressure fighter. Delphine Persoon is somebody who will take one to give one, and was basically just keeping her foot on the gas, forcing Katie Taylor to just fight an all-out brawl, basically. Now, Katie Taylor did have moments where she was throwing a nice check hook and then stepping out of range, kind of sidestepping after throwing a nice check hook. But for the most part, it was Delphine Persoon dictating the terms of the exchange and just landing more shots overall across majority of the rounds. So yeah, Katie Taylor definitely got away with one right there. But stylistically, she is a very fast fighter who's at her best when she's fighting small. And what I mean by that is when she's the one who's keeping somewhat elusive, able to basically stay out of range and then to jump in with her volume. She throws 4 to 6 punch combinations, and that's more or less her game. She'll circle, she moves very well, but she stays pretty low, kind of below the jabs of most of her opponents. She herself has a pretty nice jab, but again, she's at her best when she's able to jump in and out of range, letting her hands go, and basically getting the better of these exchanges over the course of several rounds. She's not a devastating power puncher. She's won her last 7 fights via decision, whereas Amanda Serrano has been getting a lot more stoppages. Her knockout ratio is a lot higher than Katie Taylor's. Katie Taylor has 6 knockouts out of her 20 wins, whereas Serrano has 30 knockouts out of her 42 wins. So both of these fighters throw a lot of volume. Serrano too, but Serrano mostly does it behind a jab. Again, southpaw, she'll jab her way, change levels into range, and she'll throw a hard left hand to the body and then switch it up. Throw the hard left hand up top, a sweeping right hook, and then she'll just kind of get into the trench warfare where she's just letting both hands go as well. Usually a lot quicker than her opponents. I think that she might be matched with hand speed against Katie Taylor, and Katie Taylor is a little bit thicker generally than Amanda Serrano, where she seems like she's robust enough to maintain durability through several exchanges across several rounds. So I don't know who the volume is going to favor here. What I do worry about is because of these fighters' styles, I worry about head clashes, which is generally a concern that you have when you have orthodox versus southpaw, but with their styles in particular, because again, they both kind of fight small. Amanda Serrano changes levels, and then she'll kind of jab her way in with long power punches. She likes to fight at range and then kind of get into where she's able to keep you at the end of both of her hands. Katie Taylor is not going to have that. Katie Taylor is not going to be standing at range with Serrano, letting Serrano just tee off on her at range without delivering something back. I think Katie Taylor is going to try to manage distance by either staying out of range and then jumping into range with what Richard Dwyer, online boxing analyst, would call an ambush style. Basically out of range and then you pop in with volume like Sean Porter or Manny Pacquiao, whereas Serrano is going to try to fight a little bit, I think, more of a technical fight. Again, Katie Taylor is able to circle well. I think Amanda Serrano is more or less going to be the stalker, but at some point, this will get muddy. I don't think that they are going to stay too technical for too long. I think it's going to end up being a battle of attrition where both fighters will have to let volume go, because if you are more or less neutralized in the sweet science aspect of the game, or in the case of Katie Taylor, maybe out sweet scienced a bit, I think that Serrano, being the crafty southpaw, might have the edge there. So Katie Taylor is going to have to make it a high octane, high volume affair, which Serrano is usually more than willing to oblige. So can Katie Taylor back Amanda Serrano up, jumping in and then getting Serrano to kind of take her foot off the gas a little bit and then to start circling a little bit herself? If Katie Taylor can create the impression that Serrano's not walking her down, I think that that could play to her benefit in the scorecards. If Amanda Serrano is able to make it look like Katie Taylor's not able to stay out of the way of her hard left hand, that's going to bode well for Serrano. I think you actually might get a knockdown in this fight. I don't think Serrano's going to be able to stop Katie Taylor, but I think she might be able to drop her. Katie Taylor, in my book, her only chance is to keep on throwing a lot of punches with both hands to kind of obscure what would otherwise be classified as a technical round. The muddier this fight gets, the better I think it is for Katie Taylor, because she is so adept at throwing volume. Again, Serrano is as well. These are 2-minute rounds, and Serrano will throw 60 plus punches in 2-minute rounds. I have seen Katie Taylor kind of wane in the middle and late rounds. Again, against Natasha Jonas, I thought she kind of weakened over time a bit. Also in the Pursoon fight especially, I mean, rewatch that fight. That I rarely call something an all-out robbery. I actually do see that fight as being borderline robbery. But I have seen Katie Taylor weaken and slow down a little bit in the middle and late rounds. I've seen the same thing with Amanda Serrano. Like, she had dominated Heather Hardy, who's emerged as one of the better fighters herself in 2019. She almost stopped Hardy in the first round, and Hardy ended up kind of battling back and almost not totally neutralizing things, but basically making a stronger accounting for herself in the middle and late rounds. So neither of these fighters are immune to slowing down in the middle and late rounds. So that's going to be one thing to look at. Katie Taylor being 35 years old, that's a little bit of a concern, knowing what type of fight this should develop into. You know, I think that Amanda Serrano is going to, at least by our eyes, win the majority of the rounds here, but I think that the scorecards are going to kind of even out a little bit to where I think that either way, we're going to get a split decision type of decision, but I think that this one is going to edge towards Amanda Serrano. I actually think Amanda Serrano is going to pull out a split decision or majority decision, or just a very close 115 to 113-ish, 7 rounds to 5 type unanimous decision. Something like that. But I think that this is going to be a pretty even fight where there are going to be several ebbs and flows and just, somebody putting their foot on the gas and backing the other up, and then that other one backing them up with the voluminous activity. But I think that Amanda Serrano is going to close strong, winning like 2 out of the last 3 rounds, or 3 out of the last 4 rounds, something like that. And this is almost undoubtedly going to be a fight that makes you want 3-minute rounds in women's boxing. These are going to be 2-minute rounds, and I really, oh man, this is going to be a really good fight. And it's about as good as it gets when it comes to pound for pound women in the sport. Like, these are 2 of the very top pound for pound fighters. Claressa Shields would be another, or Claressa Shields would be another. But yeah, I think this is going to be razor close either way, but I'm going with Amanda Serrano. I think it's going to take Katie Taylor a little while also to get acclimated to a southpaw with such a devastating left hand who's going to be more or less stalking her. No, Amanda Serrano doesn't have the height or reach of Natasha Jonas, but she certainly has the skill and technical ability. So I think Amanda Serrano is going to start off strong, And then I think Katie Taylor's going to battle back to win some of those middle rounds. And then I think Amanda Serrano is going to finish strong. So I think that that's going to be the slight difference. I think this one is going to be like one round determining who wins and loses this fight. I think it's going to be that close. But yeah, let me know what you think about Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano. This is about as good as it gets. This fight is taking place at Madison Square Garden. The crowd's going to be going nuts, I'm sure, and you are going to see a ton of punches thrown. I think that that much is guaranteed, and I wouldn't be surprised, again, if we get a Amanda Serrano knockdown of Katie Taylor. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.